Hello everyone, and welcome to the finale of What If Sonic and Blaze Swapped Places. As you can probably tell, this is a part of a series, so if you missed the first few parts, you can go check the playlist or the videos out in the description of the video if you feel like it. The link to the artist's Twitter will also be down there, and seriously consider checking them out. Also, if you like this content, consider subscribing or even becoming a member to get access to all my content early. Last time, we went over the events of Sonic Rush Adventure and Sonic Unleashed. Blaze met up with Prince Sonic and they talked through some of their issues following the events of Sonic 06, as well as meeting Marine. Prince Sonic took the young girl on as his apprentice of sorts, and Blaze and Miles ended up returning to their home dimension unharmed. Then, Blaze got stuck as a werecat for a while, which she got through with Amy's help. That experience made Blaze realize her feelings for the girl, and after saving the world, the two started going out. Things mostly went back to the status quo after these events. Eggman had gotten away after the Dark Gaia incident thanks to Blaze passing out in the final battle, so he was still at large. Blaze wasn't exactly happy about this, as she wanted to put an end to the Mad Doctor's machinations as soon as possible. It wouldn't be long until he had another chance to cook a scheme up, and Blaze hated waiting for him to make the first move every time. Blaze burns the candle at both ends for several nights in a row, and eventually Amy interjects. She points out that Blaze is working herself too hard, and it would only hurt her goal of stopping Eggman in the long run. Blaze is able to listen to reason, and she ends up asking Amy what she wants to do. Amy says that they're opening up a new branch of Twinkle Park, and cute couples get in for free, so it'd be a great spot for a date. Blaze sighs and asks Amy if she just wanted to spend more time with her. Amy argues that it was only like 20% of the reason she wanted to get Blaze out of the office. After spending a bit of time alone to rest and recuperate, far away from the office where she could work at Amy's request, Blaze took Amy to the new amusement park for their little date. As Amy and Blaze arrive at the new Twinkle Park, they find themselves impressed by it. It's an entire space station, orbiting the Earth with a large tractor beam for transporting people from the surface to the park. It was insanely high-tech, and if you ask Blaze, a little silly, not to mention wasteful. Amy tells her not to worry about it and to just have a good time at the park. Blaze tries to listen to her advice, but the longer they spend there, the more anxious Blaze becomes. She keeps telling herself that she's just being paranoid, but she keeps noticing more and more things that just don't seem quite right. She sees a few creatures that she doesn't recognize floating around the area that seem completely out of place. And worse, whenever she does notice them, she sees some robots in the area not too long after. All of the services in the area are also run by machines, and the robots that run the place feel just a little bit too familiar. They reminded her of the Mad Doctor's creations, but Blaze couldn't be sure. She decided to tell Amy about it, mentioning that this entire park seemed just a bit too high-tech for anyone but him to pull off. Amy thinks that Blaze is being silly, but it has been a while since Eggman's last scheme, and this all did seem a bit like his MO. Amy says that they can look into it together, just in case. However, Blaze says that she has a better plan. Instead, she calls up the Chaotix and tells them the situation. As the resident detectives at the agency, they have a far easier time figuring this out. It also means that they don't necessarily have to interrupt their date. In no time at all, Vector and Charmy arrive. Vector quickly explains that he left SBO behind to guard the agency just in case. He says that they'll get to the bottom of this in no time. The two lovebirds can just enjoy their date until they get back to them with more info. With that, Vector and Charmy are off, leaving Blaze and Amy behind. The pair spend some time looking around the park on their own, half keeping an eye out for anything suspicious and half just spending some time together. This continues until they get a strange message. Charmy is asking where they are, and Blaze tells them and asks where he is. Charmy hurriedly tells them his location and they run off to find him. Once they do, they find that Charmy is panicked and hurt, though not really injured. It's just a few scrapes here and there, but something clearly happened. Charmy says that he and Vector were ambushed by robots, and Vector got taken while trying to protect him. Charmy escaped, but he's worried about Vector. As soon as she hears this, Blaze decides that she's done sitting on the sidelines. Her and Amy are going straight to the top and getting to the bottom of this immediately. Blaze, Amy, and Charmy all rush towards the main office of the park. As they do, several robots start popping up and attacking them. They make quick work of all of them, so it's generally a non-issue. However, the fact that Blaze recognizes these robots confirms what she already suspected. Eggman is behind this. Blaze demands the Mad Doctor face her directly, and his voice booms over the intercoms. He tells Blaze that they should be careful. He won't hesitate to destroy them all if they get in his way. Blaze is pretty much done with this banter, so she simply blasts her way into the main office, only to find it empty. Blaze is confused, but she soon realizes that it's an ambush. Another one of the Doctor's giant robots pops out to battle her, and she and Amy need to fight the robot off. After a battle, they regroup and try to come up with a plan. Blaze and Amy ask Charmy to escort the few patrons of the park back to the surface as soon as he can. Their fighting hadn't gone unnoticed, and most of the patrons had already fled, but there were still some stragglers that could be hurt. With Charmy off performing his task, Amy and Blaze try to come up with a plan of attack. They locate the generators as the main points of interest from the information Vector had gathered before being captured, so they decide to start by investigating there. On their way to the first generator, they run into a cyan wisp that's trying to get their attention. They can tell that something is wrong, but they can't communicate with the creature directly. Blaze goes ahead and sends a message to Miles and asks if he has a solution to this problem. After Miles gets filled in on the situation, he says that he'll look into it, as well as get whatever information he can on Eggman's latest scheme. Blaze tells the Wisp that they'll do whatever they can to help him, but he'll have to wait a bit before they can really understand what's happening. That at least seems to help the Wisp settle down, and he follows them as they venture deeper into the park. Miles comes through with the tech they need in no time at all. He and some of his college buddies had made a translator app, and they could now use it to talk to the Wisps. The cyan wisp introduces himself as Yacker and tells them what Eggman is doing to the rest of the Wisps, capturing them and using them for something. He's not sure exactly what Eggman is doing, but he's extracting energy from the Wisps in some fashion, and it's clearly hurting them. That's all the explanation Blaze needs. She asks Yacker how they can help, and Yacker says that they need to free all of the planets from the tractor beams. From here, things are pretty normal for a bit. Blaze, Amy, and Yacker run around and fight Eggman, freeing several of the planets from Eggman's control with the help of whatever wisps they manage to free along the way. It's not until a while later that anything happens that's different to canon. Once they get to one of the generators powering the tractor beams, Eggman himself appears to taunt them some more. Blaze tells him that he's gone too far this time, taking an entire planet of sentient beings for his stupid plan, and Eggman says that Blaze has no idea just how far he's actually willing to go. He says that this seems like a great time for a test run, and then he presses a button. Blaze expects him to summon another giant robot, but instead, Vector appears. However, he has some strange energy emanating off of him, similar to when they had used a wisp to power up in the past. But it was twisted, strange. Blaze calls out to him, and Vector doesn't respond. Blaze catches on pretty quick. Blaze asks Eggman what he's done to Vector, and Eggman simply says that he's improved him. In the same way, he'll improve the entire world shortly. He commands Vector to attack, and Blaze and Amy are forced to fight against their friend. They have to be careful not to hurt him, but Blaze is sure that he'll at least forgive them for a few burns and bruises. However, his increased power thanks to the wisp energy inside of him makes him difficult for them to take down, even with the two of them fighting against him at the same time. Eventually, they seem to be winning the fight. However, at that point, Eggman approaches them again and fires a beam at Vector, filling him with even more of the corrupted wisp energy. It reinvigorates him, and Blaze realizes that if they don't stop Eggman from recharging Vector, they'll never be able to win this fight. She begins to rush towards Eggman, trying to stop his laser, but before she can, Vector lashes out. He grabs the beam and tears it off by himself, sending the Eggmobile flying away. They're both stunned and confused, and Blaze turns to see Vector smiling at her, an expression he wasn't able to make while under Eggman's control. He chuckles and says that he's not going to let some nerd tell him what to do, and Eggman runs off before Blaze can catch him. Instead, she focuses on making sure that Vector is okay. He seems to be hurt, partially due to her and Amy fighting him, and partially due to whatever Eggman had done. Vector says that he's fine, and then asks where Charmy is. Blaze assures him that Charmy is safe, and he's back at the agency now. Then she argues that he needs to go to the hospital just in case he's more hurt than he realizes. Vector waves her off. He says that before that, he needs to show them what he found. He takes them deeper into the park, and soon they come face to face with a giant machine. The same energy infecting Vector before is being pumped into the wisps, turning them into nega-wisps. It's horrible. Hundreds of thousands of sentient creatures are being brainwashed and mangled, all for Eggman's selfish plan. Vector explains that this is how Eggman turned him against his friends, and he plans to harvest enough of this reverse hyper go-on energy or whatever to use it to mind control everyone on the planet. Vector had just put all of this together when Eggman had captured him and had sent Charmy to make sure that the info got to Blaze and Amy. It looked like it had worked in a bit of a roundabout way. Blaze and Amy are horrified by what they learn, and Blaze decides silently then and there that she needs to stop Eggman for good. They all have a quick conversation and decide to have Amy escort Vector back to the surface while Blaze finishes up the last bit of work they need to do here. Amy didn't want to leave Blaze alone, but somebody needed to make sure that Vector was safe, and there were only two of them here, so they didn't have much of a choice. Once everything's decided, Amy and Vector rush off, and Blaze blasts herself towards the last couple of generators, determined to finish this as quickly as possible. Blaze makes quick work of Eggman's remaining forces. Afterwards, she tracks down Eggman himself and says that she's done going easy on him. She's not going to let him hurt anyone else. Eggman laughs and says that Blaze is far too late. He's already primed his mind control ray. In just a few moments, both she and everyone else will be unable to resist him. Blaze launches into action to try and stop Eggman, but she's too slow. The cannon fires, and Blaze is certain that all hope is lost. However, the cannon malfunctions, damaged and underpowered by Blaze's earlier efforts. The hyper go-on energy swirls together and transforms into a black hole, threatening to suck up both Blaze and Eggman. The pair of arch rivals look at each other for a moment and then take off. Blaze messages Miles and asks him to confirm that no one else is in the park at the moment. And Miles quickly tells her that she and Eggman are the only ones aboard. He asks what's happening, and Blaze says that Eggman made a black hole like an idiot. Miles immediately panics, saying that it's impossible to escape from something like that. Blaze smiles and tells Miles not to worry. She's already done the impossible before. Eggman and Blaze are both attempting to make their escape, with Eggman sending his remaining forces ablaze just to try and screw her over. Blaze just barely manages to outrun him, and she rushes towards where all the wisps are being held and frees them, telling them to get out of here as fast as they can. They all escape, and she thinks she's home free when Eggman attacks her with his newest mech, the Nega Wisp armor. Blaze says that she doesn't have time for Eggman's games. Both of their lives are at risk. The lives of all the wisps that he kidnapped were at risk. Eggman says that he'll be fine. His genius won't be snuffed out by something this trivial. Blaze rolls her eyes and decides to simply fight him. As they battle, several of the wisps Blaze freed show up to help her in this final confrontation. Blaze is able to defeat Eggman with the wisp's help, but he has taken up too much of her time already. The black hole they're running from is approaching them quickly, and Blaze had little to no time left to escape it. Eggman's mech falls beyond the event horizon, dragging him with it. The only thing left for Blaze to do is run. She sprints as fast as her legs will take her, as far as her flames will launch her, but it's just not enough. Blaze feels herself being pulled beyond the brink when she feels one last burst of energy. The wisps had come to aid her again, but this time they were pulling her towards the black hole. She's hesitant, but Blaze decides that they understand their own energy better than she does. Blaze allows herself to be pulled inside the black hole and taps into the energy of the wisps, successfully absorbing all of the hyper-go-on energy fueling the event. With that, everything seems to be okay. Blaze is able to return home and all of the wisps are unharmed. Once she's back at the agency with Amy and the Chaotix, Amy asks Blaze what happened and Blaze explains. At that point, she says that she's pretty sure this is the last they'll see of Eggman. Even he couldn't survive something like that. The room falls a bit quiet at the news. None of them are really quite sure how to react. Eventually, Blaze says that they shouldn't let this keep them down. There are still tons of people out there that they can help, Eggman or no Eggman. Everyone quickly agrees and Blaze smiles. It looks like all of this was finally over. So anyway, Eggman's still alive. After getting absorbed by the black hole, he ends up in deep space and finds the Time Eater. From there, he kicks into gear a series of events that he could have never predicted the outcome of. Eggman is in hiding for a few months. Everything's peaceful for quite some time. Eventually, Shadow does get wind of some strange goings-on aboard the Ark. This is the premonition of Black Doom's return from Dark Beginnings. He decides to take care of it by himself at first, but runs into Omega and Rouge along the way. They all decide to take care of this together, though Rouge does bother Shadow about missing Blaze's upcoming birthday party. Shadow says that he'll stop by as soon as he can and wish her a happy birthday or whatever, and goes ahead and asks Rouge to send his regards at the party itself. That's at least good enough for Rouge, and she lets Shadow leave for the Ark, similar to how things play out in canon. This brings us to Blaze's birthday party, and there's not really anything special going on here. Everything's going well and people are having a good time until a giant hole tears in space and time and the Time Eater attacks them. They all give their best effort to fight it off, of course, but they're unsuccessful. Eventually, they all get sucked into the void and everything goes a brilliant, pure white. Blaze finds herself barely holding on to consciousness. It's hard to describe exactly what's happening, but her entire body feels frozen. It's like she's been transformed into lead, every part of her requiring Herculean effort to even move. But she can still move. She pulls on the fire deep within her soul and slowly forces her body into motion. She still can't run. She could barely even force herself to walk. But once she gets that little bit of movement going, it's easier to keep the inertia going. Finally, once she does start moving, she feels lucid enough to get a hold of her surroundings. The void is composed of pure white, but in the distance, she sees a splash of color, something green. She decides to make that her destination. Through great effort, she makes her way to that splash of green. As she comes closer, Blaze is able to recognize it. It's Green Hill Zone, one of the first places she remembers fighting the Mad Doctor. It's strangely nostalgic. As she gets closer, Blaze hears a familiar noise, though it's one she has difficulty placing. It sounds almost like a saw, cutting through metal as easy as a knife through butter. The closer she gets to it, the easier it becomes for her to force herself into motion. This lets Blaze push herself even further and faster, each step making her feel more and more like her old self. Soon, whatever strangeness had been affecting her is gone, and Blaze is able to run through Green Hill Zone without any worries at all. She spots a familiar blue blur whipping around the area, tearing through Eggman's badniks with ease. Blaze lets herself breathe a sigh of relief, happy to see a familiar face. However, it appears she may have gotten her hopes up just a bit too soon. As she approaches Sonic, she realizes that he looks different. He's not wearing his usual attire. In fact, he's not wearing anything at all. His posture is far more relaxed, his smile more casual. The longer Blaze looks at him, the more she wonders if this is even Sonic at all. She approaches him, and Sonic spots her. He seems similarly confused as he stares back at Blaze. Eventually, he simply asks Blaze if that's her, and Blaze confirms that it is. She asks Sonic much the same, and he nods. Blaze laughs and asks Sonic what's up with his new style, and Sonic says that he could ask Blaze the same thing. Blaze is a bit confused, saying that she's always dressed like this, and that only seems to confuse Sonic even more. He jokes that he's never really been that fond of fashion in the first place, so he's not sure how he could have changed his style up that much anyway. At this point, Blaze is pretty sure that something weird is going on. She says as much to Sonic and asks him to talk about his own life. Blaze gets the suspicion that that might help them clear this confusion up. Sonic jokes about never missing an opportunity to talk more about himself and then gives Blaze a quick rundown of his life. He tells her about his upbringing on South Island, about fighting against Eggman, about meeting Amy and fighting a robotic copy of himself, about meeting his little brother in Tails and Knuckles, and all of the rest of his friends. The entire thing is surreal, as Blaze quickly realizes that this version of Sonic had essentially lived her entire life. Normally, Blaze would have interjected as soon as she understood what was happening, but she's in so much shock that she simply lets Sonic ramble on for far longer than is necessary. She, of course, regains her bearings in short order and interrupts him. Blaze explains that everything Sonic had told her about, she too had experienced. She had rescued Amy, had adopted Miles as her little brother, and had saved Angel Island with Knuckles. She fought Chaos and helped stop Shadow from destroying the planet, and she assumed Sonic had done all of that too. Sonic is taken aback and says that, yeah, that's also something he did. The pair stand there for a second, silent, and Sonic eventually says that they should probably get going. As weird as all of this is, they need to save their friends. They don't have time to just sit here and worry about it. Blaze agrees and lets Sonic lead the way from there. Soon enough, they make their way out of Green Hill Zone, and once they do, color returns to the area surrounding it in the white void. Even better, a frozen Miles slowly whirls to life, color literally returning to his face in real time. He smiles wide at them and then runs over to Sonic. He says that he's happy that Sonic saved him, and Sonic says that he's happy to see that Tails is okay. Right, this wasn't her Miles. This was from Sonic's timeline. That was disappointing, but Blaze was sure that everything would be okay. She gives Sonic and Tails a moment to catch up, and then asks Tails if he has any theories about what's going on. If Tails was anything like Miles, then he'll have a theory in no time. Tails says that it'll take a minute, and then he asks why Blaze is dressed so differently. Realizing the source of the confusion, Blaze explains what she and Sonic had learned, and Tails' eyes go wide. He says to give him just a second and starts messing with the Miles Electric. After a few moments, he asks if Blaze would let him test something. He'll need to scan her body real quick. Blaze says that it's fine, and Tails has her extend her arm and roll up her sleeve slightly so we can scan her body with some sort of laser. After a moment of analyzing some numbers that Blaze has no chance of understanding on his Miles Electric, he says that he thinks he understands what's going on. Tails explains that this version of Blaze seems to be from a different timeline entirely. Her tachyons or whatever were off. Eggman's monster must have torn a hole in time, allowing them to cross over. In the process, everything had got frozen, removed from all time and space, and unable to progress in any way. It seemed that Sonic and Blaze had only been able to resist the effects of this white space thanks to their incredible speed. Side note, for anyone who's a stickler for these kind of details, the reason Blaze can resist white space in this series is thanks to her going on more adventures and becoming stronger over the course of them, making her innately faster than Can and Blaze is. Of course, she's still not able to resist their effects as well as Sonic can, thanks to the differences in their powers. Anyway, Tails basically lays out the objective of the game for them, saying that if Blaze and Sonic run through each of the areas, they'll be able to restore them to their original form. They're both more than ready to get going. However, Blaze still can't help but worry about whether Miles is safe or not. They continue on to save more of their friends, or rather, Sonic's friends. Everyone they find remembers Sonic and not Blaze, and the longer this keeps going on, the more worried she becomes. Eventually, she asks Tails why everyone has memories of Sonic and not her. Tails says that he's not quite sure, but it seems like Sonic's timeline is more stable than Blaze's is. As a result, reality seems to favor pulling out elements from Sonic's universe over Blaze's when creating white space. Blaze wonders aloud what could have caused such instability. Tails says that he has no idea, but it doesn't seem to be immediately dangerous to Blaze or her timeline. With that worry put to the side, Blaze and Sonic decide to take some time to regroup and talk to the friends they've rescued so far. As of right now, they've saved Tails, Amy, and Knuckles. All three of them are at least somewhat interested in Blaze's situation, as they all said she was so similar yet so different to the Blaze they knew. It strikes Blaze that she hadn't learned essentially anything about her counterpart yet. She begins to ask them about her other self when they're all interrupted by the sounds of fighting. Sonic and Blaze immediately spring into action and rush towards the source of the noise. Once there, they see two robots going at it. It takes them just a second to recognize them as Metal Sonic and Metal Blaze. Blaze can't imagine what the pair would be fighting over and is generally confused as to why they're even here in the first place. While she's contemplating on what their next move should be, Sonic goes ahead and just launches himself into the fray. Soon the battle grows even more intense as all three combatants try to one-up each other. Blaze calls out to Sonic and tells him to stop, but it has no effect. At that point, she just decides to join him. While they're fighting, they hear Metal Blaze yelling at the other robot, calling him trash, not worth the steel he's made of. Sonic makes some comment about how aggro Metal Blaze is, but Blaze is focused solely on her copy. She barely even hears him. Eventually, they manage to defeat the pair of robots and find that they were fighting over a Chaos Emerald. The pair take it and get ready to leave when Metal Blaze stands back up. Apparently, she wasn't ready to accept her loss just yet. Sonic gets into a fighting stance, but Blaze stops him. She approaches Metal Blaze with even steps and begins speaking. She asks Metal why she and Metal Sonic were fighting in the first place. Metal Blaze says that she couldn't stand to see that pale imposter stand next to her. She was the Doctor's finest creation, regardless of if he was willing to recognize that or not. Blaze asks Metal if she's going to keep chasing her ridiculous sense of pride above all else. Metal responds that Blaze isn't even worth listening to. She's already rejected her true purpose. It's only a matter of time before Metal is able to surpass her. Blaze says that someday Metal will come to understand how much she's limiting herself. Then she says that Metal can keep fighting if she feels like she must, but by now, she should understand that she can't be both her and Sonic at the same time in this state. Metal is silent for a moment before taking off away from the pair. After a moment, Sonic speaks up. He asks Blaze a few questions about her version of Metal. If she was still working with Eggman, if she had that weird self-image thing still going on, and what she'd been doing recently. Blaze tells him what she knows. For anyone unaware, because I haven't been that direct about it, at the end of Sonic Heroes, it was a bit vague in this series if Eggman had caught and reprogrammed Metal Blaze or not. And I decided that it's more interesting if she just goes rogue at that point. So in this series, Metal Blaze is still biding her time and waiting to kill and replace the normal Blaze, though my plans for paying off that plotline wouldn't really happen for quite a while, so that's more of a possible Season 2 idea if I ever want to return to this What If. After their encounters with the Metals, Sonic and Blaze continue to fight their way through white space, attempting to gather the rest of the Chaos Emeralds. But at this point, it's about time we got a quick change in perspectives. While Sonic and Blaze were busy trying to fight their way through white space, Shadow was dealing with his own half of this story. After the encounter with the Doomai, Shadow finds himself in white space, alone. Immediately, he begins to investigate his surroundings, trying to make sense of this strange area, and he notices something is happening. The entire area lurches, twisting and reforming around him without rhyme or reason. Shadow feels his head ache, like his brain is splitting in two, and some part of him senses that time itself is starting to break down. With the Chaos Emerald he has on hand, Shadow activates Chaos Control to shield himself from whatever is happening. After shifting time and space around him for a moment, Shadow returns to the reformed white space. Everything seems to be exactly the same as before, at least at first. As he looks around the area, he spots something weird. Himself, or more accurately, someone who looks basically exactly like him. Shadow stares at his copy for a moment before approaching him and asking him what's happening. The pair are both suspicious of each other, but after some interrogation, they're both able to realize what's going on. They're both the real Shadow, but once again from different timelines. They're able to narrow the change in timelines to Sonic and Blaze's places being swapped around. However, the pair both quickly decide that that isn't really that important in the long run. Black Doom needs to be stopped, and that should be their main objective. Neither of them really want to work together, but neither of them have a good enough reason to work alone either. The best compromise they can come to is to divide and conquer, each working through a separate area of white space and mostly just teaming up for the most dangerous of enemies. They soon encounter Omega and Rouge and discover, similar to Sonic and Blaze, that they only had their memories from Sonic's universe. This of course perturbs the Blaze universe Shadow as he wonders exactly why he alone was spared from whatever white space was doing. Though looking back on it, he feels as if his earlier Chaos Control may have something to do with all of this. While they're chatting with Rouge about all of this, she snaps and says that she's had enough of this nonsense. The Shadow from her universe asks what she's talking about, and Rouge says that she's not going to keep calling them the Shadow from my timeline and the Shadow from the other timeline every time they need to refer to each other. They need nicknames or codenames or something to keep this sensible. The other Shadow huffs and says that this is silly, but the Shadow from Blaze's universe agrees, if only for the sake of clarity and to get Rouge off of their back. They spend a bit of time arguing about it, but eventually they decide to call Shadow from the original timeline Terios and the one from the altered timeline Eclipse for the time being. The names don't really mean that much, Rouge kind of just threw them out there and they stuck. This mostly catches us up to when Terios and Eclipse meet up with Sonic and Blaze for the rival fight, but there is one notable change I want to directly address. Specifically, that Maria and Gerald aren't in this version of events. The main reason for their exclusion is that I just didn't think I could handle juggling all of the things I'm adding to the story while also making sense of how Gerald and Maria would fit into things and also doing Shadow's arc from Shadow Generations here. It does make me a bit sad to not be able to do such a great story in this series, but at the same time, I don't want to ruin such a great moment for Shadow's character by doing a bad version of it. Anyway, that gives us the context we need when the two pairs meet up. Sonic and Blaze are initially confused as to why there are two Shadows suddenly, but Sonic recovers quickly. He struts over to the Shadows and demands they give him the Chaos Emerald. Terios snarls at him and the pair begin arguing. Eclipse just rolls his eyes at them and turns to Blaze. She calmly asks Eclipse what happened, and he tells her about the timeline splitting and the codenames that he and the other Shadow are using. Blaze breathes out a sigh of relief when Eclipse says that he remembers her. She tells him that everyone else they've rescued so far was from Sonic's timeline. Eclipse explains that he believes his presence here is the result of Chaos Control. While they're having a civil conversation, Sonic and Terios' argument has only escalated. The pair seem like they're about to compete for the Chaos Emerald when Blaze interrupts them. She goes ahead and just asks Terios why he needs the emerald at all, and he simply says that it's none of their business. Eclipse tells her that they need it to defeat Black Doom. Terios' gaze snaps to Eclipse, and he asks him why he would tell them that, and Eclipse simply says that he trusts Blaze. Sonic and Blaze are both worried at this news, remembering what happened last time Black Doom attacked. They ask what he wants this time around, and Eclipse explains his whole plot. Blaze immediately says that Eclipse and Terios can keep the Chaos Emerald until they're finished defeating Black Doom, which causes Sonic to reel back in shock. He asks why'd she just give it up like that, and Blaze looks at him curiously. Blaze says that she doesn't see this as giving up the Chaos Emerald at all, and further comments that Sonic just seems like he wants to be difficult. Blaze turns back to Eclipse and says that she'd offer to help him fight against Black Doom, but at the moment they're a bit preoccupied. And besides, with the neurotoxin still being a possible threat, the shadows are the ones best suited for the job. Eclipse says that her best wishes are unnecessary but appreciated. The two finish giving a quick goodbye and Eclipse turns to leave before he suddenly stops. He turns around and says that he almost forgot. He needs to tell Blaze happy birthday. Blaze gives him a quick thanks, and with that, Eclipse leaves, motioning for Terios to follow. For their part, Sonic and Terios are mostly just staring at them. Sonic's still a bit upset that Blaze just gave them the Chaos Emerald without a fight, but more than anything, they're surprised to see that Blaze and her version of Shadow seeming to get along with each other. Sonic says as much, and Blaze just shrugs. They've both saved each other's lives several times over by now. She saw no reason why they couldn't at least be polite to each other. Terios shakes his head and says that he'll never understand them before rushing off. With that taken care of, Sonic and Blaze return to their hunt for the Chaos Emeralds. Everything goes pretty normal until they make their way to Crisis City. For once, rushing through the area and returning things to normal doesn't seem to help one of Sonic's friends return. However, as white space around them finishes warping, a portal opens in front of them, one that looks completely different to all the others they've seen so far. Sonic says that they should check out where it leads, just in case it's important, and Blaze sees no reason to argue. Once they hop through, they find themselves in another pocket of white space with new but familiar locations. Blaze and Sonic clock the areas as segments of the Soul Dimension, though they only recognize a few of them from their brief forays into that world. Most importantly, they see that someone has been restoring the area, similar to what they and the Shadows have been doing. The pair are pretty quick to guess who's responsible, and Sonic zips away to track them down. Blaze shakes her head. She's quickly learned that this version of Sonic was somehow even more of a handful than the one she already knew. It takes only a moment for Blaze to find where Sonic ran off to. Once she does, she comes face to face with her own counterpart. Blaze stops and takes in her appearance. This version of Blaze is regal, composed. It's surreal in a way that's hard to describe to see someone who is identical to herself, but not quite. The other Blaze notices her presence and stares at her, much like Blaze herself had just done. The other Blaze says that Sonic was right. This version of her was a lot like him, and it was very weird. Sonic laughs and says that he thinks the two of them will probably get along. Blaze can't help but ask her counterpart about herself. The other Blaze is happy to explain. Apparently, Sonic had told her a bit about Blaze before she had arrived. The other Blaze introduces herself as the Princess of the Soul Empire and the Guardian of the Soul Emeralds. She continues on for a moment, but Blaze isn't really focusing on anything she's saying. Instead, her mind is clicking a few things into place. Throughout this entire thing, Blaze had wondered what the version of herself from Sonic's timeline was like, but she hadn't had time to think about it or ask Sonic himself for any details. There was just always something else that was more important going on. Regardless, there was something about seeing herself declared the princess of her version of Sonic's home that just felt wrong. She couldn't help but feel like she was taking something from the prince. Her unease must have been apparent. Princess Blaze says unprompted that Prince Sonic was similarly disturbed by this news. This shocks both Blaze and Sonic. Princess Blaze and Sonic hadn't had quite enough time to discuss his counterpart, apparently, and he can't help but ask what Prince Sonic is like. Princess Blaze grimaces at the question and says that it seems like they may have caught him at a bad time. Still, they should probably go talk to him anyway. The princess leads them deeper into their section of white space to find the prince. On the way, she explains that after they got attacked, she was sucked into her own section of the void, and the soul emeralds were scattered across white space. She and the prince had been attempting to recover them. Sonic and Blaze both say that they'd love to help, but they have a similar problem on their hands. Princess Blaze assures them that she and the prince have it covered. Eventually, they make their way over to where Prince Sonic is sitting. Sonic smirks and runs over to the prince and cracks a joke about his outfit. Prince Sonic just glares at him silently until Sonic feels awkward enough to walk away. After that interaction, Sonic asks Princess Blaze what's up with him. The princess says that he seemed more chipper at first, but as soon as he heard that she was the princess of the Soul Dimension in her timeline, he clammed up and started glaring at everything. He didn't seem to want to talk about whatever it was that was bothering him. Blaze understood what the issue was immediately. She turns to Prince Sonic and asks him if he's fine with her explaining the situation to them. Prince Sonic says that Blaze can do as she wishes. It's as much her business as it is his. With that, Blaze explains to the pair that there were a lot of people in Prince Sonic's timeline that believed him unfit to be Prince. It was a bit of a sore spot for the prince, and it only got worse once Blaze had shown him up when they first met. Learning that Blaze herself was technically royalty only made things even more awkward between them. Sonic and Princess Blaze both nod, but Blaze's explanation is interrupted by a dark chuckle from Prince Sonic. You still don't get it. Even after everything is laid out in front of you, you're still averting your eyes from the truth. Blaze asks Prince Sonic what he's talking about. He stands and turns to the group. Do you remember what I told you about my birth? About how I wasn't born into the royal family, but adopted into it? Blaze nods slowly. Prince Sonic continues. The circumstances have always been a mystery to me. I spent a while looking for my birth parents after I learned the truth. Curiosity got the better of me, and a part of me worried that they were still grieving my loss, not knowing that their child was still alive somewhere. I scoured the entirety of the Soul Dimension, but I never found them. It seemed as if I just popped into existence out of nowhere. It's strange, isn't it? It puzzled me for years. Even worse was trying to find what had happened to the true heir to the royal family. You remember that, yes? My parents had a daughter, one by blood, who disappeared without a trace. Every once in a while, I just couldn't help but wonder what she was like. Who was she? Where was she? A part of me felt like we were family in a kind of strange way. We had never met, but we shared the same destiny. I searched for her too, but I could never find her, even with all of the manpower of everyone in the Empire. Sure, it was a difficult task, but we could find almost anyone we wanted to without much difficulty. It didn't make sense. Surely they just couldn't have disappeared, could they? And then I met you. The second I saw you, I felt that something was wrong, but I just couldn't put my finger on it. It wasn't until I returned to my dimension after the business with that creature ruining the timeline that I realized what it was. You reminded me of someone I had never even met. You looked exactly like my mother. A part of me couldn't help but think that there was more to all of this, but I couldn't believe it. You were from an entirely different dimension. I told myself I was just being paranoid. I told myself I was just needlessly holding on to past grudges, but the truth is somehow worse. Once I saw the original timeline laid out in front of me, once I saw how things were supposed to go, I knew what had happened. I don't know how, and I don't know why, but I can't deny the truth anymore. The missing heir to the throne, the baby I replaced, it was you. Blaze, you're the princess of the Soul Dimension. Everyone is silent. After a moment, Blaze turns around. She says that she needs some time to herself to process all of this. Sonic and Princess Blaze softly say that's fine, and Blaze finds a quiet corner of white space to sit down and think. The worst part was that it all made sense. Her mind kept going back to the mural on Angel Island. She had always felt that something was out of place, but the mural was the first concrete proof she had that something was wrong. It all made so much more sense now. It was Sonic. It had always been Sonic. She was just too blind to see it. After a while, Sonic ends up approaching Blaze. He makes his presence known by clearing his throat. Blaze tells him that he can sit down if he wants. Sonic is silent as he sits next to her and waits for her to speak first. Eventually, Blaze spills her guts to him. She tells him about how she had always felt this feeling of wrongness. She tells him about the mural and that everything seemed off. More than anything, Blaze feels frustrated with herself that she didn't see the truth sooner. It had been right in front of her face for so long, and she had never even considered the possibility. Sonic tells her to not be too hard on herself. Realistically, there wasn't much she could have done to piece this together all on her own. Blaze can't find it in herself to argue, but it doesn't make her feel any better. A part of her wonders where she even belongs at this point. She can't just steal Prince Sonic's empire away from him, but she wasn't sure if she should stay in the Chaos Dimension and just act like nothing had even happened. Sonic says that ultimately that's her decision to make. He says that if she's anything like the Blaze that he knows, she's fiercely loyal, clever, and above all, strong. Whatever path she chooses, she'll do right by those important to her. He's sure of it. Blaze thanks Sonic for his words, and then says that they should probably just focus on fixing everything for now. A ways away, Prince Sonic and Princess Blaze are talking. Blaze apologizes for being presumptuous earlier. Prince Sonic says to think nothing of it. He just needed to process everything he had learned. Princess Blaze nods and then asks Sonic how he's gonna deal with all of this new information. Prince Sonic is silent before saying that he supposes that he'll have to give up the throne. The true heir had been found, and there was no longer a use for him. Blaze is slightly startled at the declaration, but she doesn't react too harshly. Instead, Princess Blaze says that she very much doubts that her counterpart even wants the throne to begin with. As far as the princess knew, Blaze had far too many people here in the Chaos Dimension to simply leave. If she never challenged Sonic's claim to the throne, then his reign remained legitimate. Prince Sonic asks if that's the right thing for everyone to do. The people of the Soul Dimension had been living a lie for years, and if Sonic told them, they'd likely want him deposed. The nobles certainly would. The only way to resolve this political turmoil would be for Blaze to take over in his stead. Neither of them liked the idea of lying to their people, and the situation was dire no matter how Blaze looked at it. Prince Sonic says softly that maybe, just maybe, this was for the best. He wasn't a great prince anyway. The more time he had spent around Blaze, the more he realized that she really was born for this. It was then that Princess Blaze decided that all of the political drama was a distraction from the real problem. Blaze says firmly that, as similar as they are, she can tell how different she and her counterpart are. Blaze trained for years to be the princess, as did Sonic. Their counterparts, by contrast, had spent their time working on something else entirely. Were Blaze to take over as princess, she'd be even more overwhelmed than Sonic is right now. Prince Sonic shrugs and says that she'd adjust to it. She'd grow. Blaze says maybe so, but if Sonic is anything like the Sonic she knows, he can grow into his role too. After a brief pause, Blaze says that she can't think of anyone else that she would trust to lead her people besides the prince. Furthermore, she's confident that her counterpart feels that the prince's place is ruling the empire as well. That's at least enough to satisfy Prince Sonic for now. He thanks Blaze for her words, and they decide to go ahead and get back to work. With that revelation at least momentarily dealt with, the pairs regroup to talk about what they'll do next. They decide to run all this info by Tails. Once they do, Tails messes with the Miles Electric for a moment before saying that all of this was actually a huge help. With all of that extra info, he was able to determine that Blaze and Sonic swapping places was the exact point where the timeline split. If there was any instability caused by this going forward, he'd be able to counteract it a lot more easily. However, he also notes that the temporal distortion around the event seems a bit strange. More likely than not, this was all intentional. Someone had gone back in time and swapped the two of them as children. It didn't take his genius to figure out who was responsible. Eggman. This must have been the goal of using the time meter to tear away into the past. Tails isn't quite sure what Eggman's plan is with all this, but he assumes it was meant to weaken them somehow. They all say that they won't let Eggman get his way and prepare to gather the last few Chaos Emeralds and Soul Emeralds and take the fight to Eggman. While all of this is going down, Terios and Eclipse are making their way through the last of the obstacles between them and Black Doom. They had defeated the Bio-Lizard and Metal Overlord and obtained all of the Doom powers in the area. All that was left was to deal with Black Doom himself. As they did so, their father taunts them, saying that they'll never truly be complete without him and other such nonsense. The pair both ignore him. Terios says that he can take care of Black Doom by himself, and Eclipse responds that he likely can, but that's not the point. It'll be far more safe for the two of them to work together. Terios wants to argue, but he's learned at this point that his counterpart is just as stubborn as he is. Terios says that regardless, he's going to be the one to finish Black Doom off. Eclipse just scoffs and says if he's going to be that petty about it, it's fine. Soon they're upon Black Doom for their final encounter. The fight goes pretty similar to how it does in the game, except much easier thanks to there being two of them against the one Black Doom. After forcing Black Doom into Neo Devil Doom and Terios apparently striking the final blow, both Shadows are convinced that everything is over. However, after Black Doom's defeat, everything suddenly stops. Neither of the pair could move, so they're both left wondering what's happening as everything suddenly reverses around them. Soon they're standing before Black Doom yet again, giving the same speech he did at the beginning of the fight. The fight begins shortly thereafter, and neither Terios nor Eclipse have enough time to try and figure out what's happening. They defeat Black Doom once again, and again, everything freezes around them. The world begins rewinding, and the pair realize that if they don't do something soon, they'll quickly be worn down. Eclipse says that whatever is happening is at least reminiscent of Chaos Control. Their best bet is to have one of them handle destroying Black Doom and the other use Chaos Control to warp them out of the time loop they're stuck in. Of course, defeating Black Doom after being this worn down and without the benefit of Chaos Control would be a tall ask. Still, Terios is confident he'll be able to do it. They fight Black Doom one final time, Terios battling against him and Eclipse focusing on channeling the Chaos Emerald's power. Terios is able to nearly defeat Black Doom, but when Neo Devil Doom activates Chaos Control, he has no counter. He's wounded by Devil Doom, but Eclipse can't stop his Chaos Control to help him. All he can do is trust that Terios is strong enough to win this fight without him. Terios forces himself back to his feet despite his injury and pushes himself just a bit further. At this point, he feels he has only one option left. He removes his inhibitor rings for one last boost of energy and is able to defeat Black Doom. As reality starts to shift around them, Eclipse activates Chaos Control and warps them back to white space before the time loop can reset them to the beginning of the fight. Once they arrive, Eclipse notices that something's wrong with Terios. He's on the ground, convulsing. Though they don't know what happened, the combination of his Doom powers and removing his inhibitor rings has backfired on his body. Eclipse moved to put his inhibitor rings back on as quickly as he can. Still, it doesn't seem to do enough. Terios is still in serious trouble, so Eclipse uses the emerald to warp the pair to Rouge and Omega. They're both concerned for their friend's safety and immediately begin to administer first aid. Still, it doesn't look good for him. Eclipse explains what had happened and says that he suspects foul play was involved. He asks if Eggman had done something, but Rouge shakes her head. She says that she kept an eye out for Eggman this entire time, and the Mad Doctor didn't have any idea about their entire ordeal with Black Doom in the first place. She had personally made sure of that. Still, it did seem as if someone had sabotaged their fight, though who could have done such a thing, Rouge had no idea. Eclipse shakes his head. He says that he'll bring the Chaos Emerald back to Blaze and Sonic so they can finish this quickly. The faster they can all get out of this, the sooner they can take Terios to a hospital and hopefully heal him. Rouge tells him to go ahead. They'll make sure Terios is okay. Around that time, the Sonics and Blazes have finished gathering all the emeralds and are approaching the Time Eater. Eclipse appears before them and explains the situation as quickly as he can. They all consider going back to help Terios, but Eclipse tells them that they have a job to do. The best way that they can help Terios now is by defeating Eggman and helping him get to the emergency room as quickly as possible. The Sonics and Blazes agree, and they approach Eggman and his Time Eater for the final showdown. The four of them appear before Eggman and announce that this is all over. Eggman snarls at them. He mumbles something under his breath about unexpected aberrations before summoning the Time Eater to attack them. The four all ascend to their super forms and begin to fight against the Time Eater. Blaze and Prince Sonic are the most furious of them all, especially the Prince. He yells at Eggman, demanding that Eggman explain why he did this. Why did he take Sonic and Blaze from their homes? Why did he ruin their lives like this? Eggman simply stares at the hedgehog. He states that he has no idea what Sonic is talking about or who he even is, and attacks him with the Eggmobile. The four continue the fight against the Time Eater, with Sonic's friends cheering them on in the background, though Blaze can't help but worry about what Eggman had said. It seemed that this was the Eggman from Sonic's timeline, which means that he couldn't be related to the swap in the first place. But that didn't make sense. If not Eggman, who could have intervened? At that moment, everything stops. The only things able to move at all are the Time Eater and the four of them that are in their super forms. But even then, it's just barely. Eclipse recognizes it immediately. It's identical to the way time had lurched while he had been fighting against Black Doom. However, he's now unable to respond to anything without his Chaos Emerald. Everyone, even Eggman, seems shocked by this turn of events. Then a voice speaks to them in the back of their heads. It says that it wished to finish this another way, but now it had no choice but to use brute force. Its plans hadn't quite worked out the way they wanted, but it would be no matter. Soon it will force its way back into this world and make them all pay for daring to raise a finger against them. Blaze calls out, asking who it is that's doing this and what is it that they want. She asks how they're involved in all this, if they're the one responsible for all of the strange things going on. The splitting and merging of the timelines and everything. They're the only one left who could have caused all of this. The voice laughs. Clever girl. You're right, it was me. I'm the one responsible for all of this. Blaze demands that they show themselves already, and the voice laughs back at them once again. Then Mephilis appears before them. He explains that after he was defeated by Shadow and Whitespace, he realized that he had only a few moments to try and find a foothold in this world, a way to hold onto his precious existence. He needed to weaken this timeline, create a flaw that he could exploit at another point in time to worm his way back into reality. But he couldn't simply destroy everything by causing a paradox. He also had very little power and almost no time to act. All he could do was make the smallest of changes, the tiniest of aberrations to give him a chance to escape during the Solaris project. So, he had intervened after Blaze's and Sonic's birth. He expected that they would be strong enough to still give him the chance to form, but they would be much weaker than they were originally. As Mephilis watched them grow up, he had become ecstatic. He could just tell how much weaker they were than their original versions. Blaze, full of doubt, constantly questioning every decision she made. Sonic, brash, irresponsible, prideful, both just so deliciously exploitable. He knew he had won the battle before it even began. But somehow, they had still defeated him. Somehow he had still lost, despite doing everything he could to make them as weak as possible. He had defeated Sonic before he even raised a finger against him, and he still lost. But it didn't matter. It was all over now. Even with the four of them, they couldn't possibly hold a candle to him now. Not with the power of Eggman's greatest creation under his thumb. With a snap of his fingers, Mephilis merges with the Time Eater. Time is shattered almost beyond repair. Even in their super forms, the Sonics and Blazes can no longer move, completely frozen in place. Mephilis' laugh echoes in their heads, gloating that he's ascended far beyond anything they've ever fought before. He's no longer just a threat to this timeline and this reality. He could control and destroy any timeline, infinite universes, nay, multiverses. He could snap in and out of existence with a mere thought. So, how should he play with them first? Maybe he could craft each of them their own personal hell to torture them for all eternity. Or maybe he could simply delete them from existence, force them to endure the same fate they had so callously thrust upon him. After all, it was only a matter of time before their pathetic little gemstones broke down and they were completely powerless before him. The four of them each tried to force themselves to move, but they were unsuccessful. Even in their super forms, they were just too weak. Mephilis' powers over reality were too vast, and their wills weren't strong enough to overcome his own. After all, they were each but one person. Mephilis, in this form, was infinite in scope, existing not only here, but in all possible realities at the same time. And Mephilis lets them know that. He shows them brief glimpses into all the other timelines, infinite versions of themselves being slaughtered by Mephilis for his own twisted amusement. It really seemed like all hope had been lost. They were going to lose, and who knows what awful fate Mephilis had in store for them. Still, Blaze couldn't focus on that. She didn't fear for herself. She only felt fear for her friends, for her girlfriend Amy, for everyone else that Mephilis was going to hurt. It was almost impossible to comprehend how much damage Mephilis could do, but the small glimpse of it Blaze could see had made her heart break. Her heart broke for Miles, for Amy, for the Chaotix and Cream and Shadow and Rouge, and for her people. Blaze pauses. Her people? That wasn't right. She wasn't princess or anything. But somehow she could feel it. She could feel the devotion to the people of the Soul Empire, her need to protect them, her feelings burning deep, deep within her core. No, not her feelings. Princess Blaze's feelings. Blaze could feel what her counterpart felt, and if she focused on it, she could remember what she remembered, know what she knew, and she could tell that Princess Blaze was experiencing the same thing. As much as they were different, they were the same in one aspect: their devotion to others, their willingness to protect those important to them no matter what. That was the core of who Blaze was, the core of who both of them were. And it was the core of every version of her that existed, across all timelines and realities. If Blaze focused hard enough, Blaze could feel all of them too. Distantly, Blaze realized that by connecting them to every other version of themselves, Mephilis had made a huge mistake. He may have been able to strike terror into them, but he also gave them an opportunity to grow into something beyond themselves. Blaze and Princess Blaze reached towards each other, accepting every difference and flaw between the pair of them. Slowly, they ceased to be two and became one, more powerful and wise than either of them were before. And then they reached out to another timeline, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another, over and over, until they reached out to every Blaze all over all the universes. Across all of those realities, they had done so much, made so many mistakes, made so many friends, seen and done so many things. It was overwhelming to have infinite sets of memories and thoughts, but it was manageable, as long as they all focused on who they were. At the very core of their being, the one thing that connected all of them, Blaze could hold it all together. Blaze opens their eyes. It's obvious that something is different. They had the power not only of the Chaos Emeralds, but of the Soul Emeralds and of the will of an infinite number of selves. This power pushed them beyond Brilliant Blaze, beyond Burning Blaze, beyond any other power they had ever encountered. They had stepped into something further beyond, the ultimate self, a fusion of everything they ever were and ever will be. Hyper Blaze. Their eyes turn to Sonic and they see that they too had reached this form. Mephilis is stammering as he watches them. He asks how they could do such a thing, that such a power was impossible for a mere mortal. Sonic just shrugs. Just one more supposed impossibility he had downgraded to merely very improbable. Blaze asks if Sonic would like to do the honors, and Sonic accepts graciously. With that, the pair attack Mephilis. The ensuing battle would be difficult to describe with mere words. Three beings capable of altering reality with their thoughts clash. With every blow, the very foundations of existence, the very laws of physics, tilt and break. Mephilis is powerful and clever, but his will was nothing compared to the two of them. They overwhelm him, tearing him apart from the time meter and destroying it in the process. They return everything to the relative stability of white space, the only place where Mephilis can still exist in their timelines, and the being pleads with them for mercy. He begs them to spare him, to give him a chance to at least exist. Sonic is conflicted as to what to do, their merciful streak acting up once again. Blaze, however, takes one step forward and asks Mephilis a simple question. Why? Why did he go through all of this trouble? Why did he feel the need to take revenge on them? Mephilis is silent before saying that he's not really sure what Blaze is asking. They respond that of course he does it. He's lying, as he always did, as he always would. He destroys because he cannot comprehend anything else. He always chose to take from others, always chose revenge and spite over any other option, and he would never change. Not because he couldn't, but because he didn't want to. With that, Blaze snaps their fingers and scatters Mephilis onto the winds of reality. Sonic shakes their head, saying that that was cruel. Blaze responds that they gave Mephilis a chance. If he had any reason for his actions, any at all, they would have spared him. If he had been hurting and was just lashing out, or simply desperate and believed that this was the only way to survive, they would have given him a chance. But the question of why he did anything never even crossed Mephilis' mind. He only knew destruction and turned away from every opportunity to learn anything else. He was truly irredeemable. Sonic says that they don't believe that anyone can be irredeemable, and Blaze says that they'll simply have to agree to disagree for now. With that argument settled, the pair decide they need to return everything to how it had been before all of this. They undo all the damage to the timeline Eggman had done with the time meter. They send everyone and everything in white space back to where it belonged, and then finally, after one quick goodbye, they split themselves apart and send the different versions of themselves back to their original timelines. Blaze opens her eyes to see her birthday party, as it was before. Everyone is a bit groggy, confused as to what had happened, but Blaze would be able to explain it all pretty easily. She gestures to Prince, Sonic, and Shadow, the only two who should have memories of what had transpired in white space. Shadow asks them what happened after Mephilis appeared, and the two explain what they, or rather, what they as a larger whole did. Shadow is a bit confused as to how all of this even works, and Blaze and Prince Sonic say that honestly they're not quite sure either. But the timeline should be separated permanently now, and they had made sure that the other timeline Shadow was healthy before splitting everything apart. Mephilis was gone for good, and everyone was safe and sound. Shadow nods and then says that it seems that everything is in order. With that, he slinks away to a far corner of the party to be alone. Blaze sighs, but Sonic says to give the guy a break. After all, he had just spent all day hanging out with Shadow of all people. Blaze would want some alone time too in his position. Blaze laughs and the pair look at each other silently for a moment. It was strange. In one sense, now that they knew what had really happened, why everything was the way it was, everything was different now. But in another sense, nothing had really changed. Blaze was the hero of the Chaos Dimension, running around with her gang of ragtag do-gooders to help wherever they could. Sonic was the prince of the Soul Dimension, the protector of his people, and nothing and no one could take that away from them. Silent understanding flows between the two. Blaze breaks eye contact to go talk to Amy. She had a lot of explaining to do, after all. And that's the final episode of this series, at least unless I come back and actually do a season 2 after all. Before I shout out the members again, I want to say that a few people actually did guess the entire twist with Mephilis when I foreshadowed in episode 4, which is kind of insane to me. Like, all I really revealed was that Mephilis knew about the original version of 06, and somehow people got from that to he's the one behind the swap and he did it to get an advantage against Sonic. I'm honestly impressed that more than one person was able to put that together. Anyway, I want to really quickly thank everyone who's been a fan of this series. It means so much to me that there are, no joke, hundreds to maybe thousands of people who care enough about this stupid fanfic I wrote to come back and watch it over the course of a couple months. Seriously, it's super cool, and I really hope you guys enjoyed watching these as much as I enjoyed making them. That's enough yapping though, let's go ahead and shout out all of my YouTube members. Big shoutouts to Elric111, Agent B7, Bokabara, Sonic Storm, Mega Sonic Bros, Joseph Florian, Fate Testarossa, and GB484.